Hello again, loved ones, and shout out to the diehards as well as the tie-dye nation. Thank you for joining Ties vs. Dyes for another exciting episode. On today's show, we will be demonstrating how to do a classic spiral design with a more modern dye application process. That way you end up with a vintage looking shirt that is still fresh and still is guaranteed to break necks and turn heads. And so first things first, you're going to want to open up your shirt and you're just going to want to get it as flat and even and as symmetrically opened up as possible. You don't want there to be any creases or any folds that you don't even out, and that is going to be your first step in this process. And it's pretty self-explanatory. Just watch as I'm doing here in this video and you will be able to follow these steps and you will be able to create a spiral masterpiece all of your own. And so notice here what I am doing. I actually have a sinew puller, and what I'm doing is I'm using that to hold down my center of my spiral. And you can use anything for this. You could use tweezers, you could use a butter knife, you could use a fork, whatever is convenient and on hand for you. And so when you want to start out getting ready for your spiral design, what you need to do is you want to pick where you want that spiral to start. Do you want it to be a center spiral? Do you want it to be off to the lower side or off to the upper side? And that really is going to dictate how you go about spinning the rest of your shirt. And literally that's what you do. You hold down the center point and you just spin it. And be sure though to take note on how I'm doing this, to where you want to not only spin the shirt, but you want to kind of open it back up and go over all of those creases as you see me doing here. And you want to open them back up and stretch them out, because you don't want them to be overly too large or too clumpy. You want them to be as tight and as small as possible. And so you see me here spinning that. So whenever I get to a point where I think that the folds are going to be good, I will just go ahead and crank that a little bit more. But then always you're going to be going back and opening those folds back up and making the larger ones smaller. That way when we get into the dye absorption and the dye application process, you will not have funny looking folds in your spiral shirt. And that's the beauty of this method also, is that you don't necessarily have to overly stress on the folds of the spiral because of the dye application process. The technique that we are going to use, it's really just an oversaturating process, and that is going to give us a really well blended and a really popping and colorful, bold shirt at the finish. And so that's what I'm going to be showing you today in this tutorial. And so this is actually going to be a 5-color spiral shirt. And so for that, you guessed it, we're going to be using 5 different main colors. But also what we're going to do is within those colors, we're going to break down into their own separate categories. So we're going to use pinks, purples, blues, greens, and yellows. But we're going to use 2 to 3 different shades and 2 to 3 different colors of each of the dye choices that we made, in order to really give the shirt depth and in order to really give it a unique look that I haven't seen too often in the spiral shirt design. And I think it's a really good way to keep it classic, but also put your own unique spin on it. And it really gives it a lot of depth and a lot of bold transitions when you do it this way. So just follow along and you'll be happy with your results for sure. And what I mean by that is, so when we go with the pinks, we're going to be using fuchsia pink, as well as petal pink, as well as pale pink. And those are going to all be just in the pink segment. And that'll give you a like an ombre transition within the color, within the spiral band itself. And so that's part of the technique of using this dye application process. And as well as with the purples, so with the color purples, we're going with royal purple as well as violet purple. And then we're also going to be using aquamarine blue as well as royal blue. And then we are going to be using grass green as well as chartreuse, as well as emerald green, and I think we're gonna finish it with a lemon yellow to really bring those colors and really get a good transition on the color bleeding that we're gonna see here on the finished result. And so notice here on the shirt how it's getting tighter and tighter, and that's what you really want. You want it to be like a frisbee when you're done with it, to where you don't want it to be falling apart or folding apart. You want it to be really tightly bound because of the process with the dye application. That's what you really need. So preparation is key. So prep the shirt well, and you will get a good result that you're very happy with, and that you are gonna probably go to again and again, no doubt. And so notice here how we're just keeping going in that circle, following those circles, looking for any loose ends to bind down, and you just keep doing it in a clockwise motion, and you just continue to bind, and then you pull it tight. And also notice how I'm keeping that hand down on the shirt. That's key as well. You want to keep that hand down to keep the shirt binding as flat and as even as possible, because you don't want that shirt to fold up on itself. And the way you prevent that is by just keeping that other hand firmly pressed down, applying firm pressure as you pull tight your fishing line. So yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to draw attention to while I have you here is the prep of the shirt. So what we did to prep this shirt, we actually dipped it in soda ash. So we gave it a soda ash bath, and we also boiled it. So we boil it, and then we dip it in soda ash, and then we let it dry out. That way we get a good dye absorption as well as a good chemical bond to the shirt, and that is what I recommend doing for that. Also keep in mind, you always want to try to go with 100% cotton, or as close to 100% cotton as possible. That will make your dye chemical bond happen a lot easier, and it will make the outcome of the shirt and the longevity of your tie-dye shirts be what you want them to be and be where they should be. And so just keep that in mind and keep the prep in mind. But yeah, take a look here. Notice how that shirt's starting to come together, how it's starting to get tighter. And don't overly be concerned with how many times it takes. Just continue to wrap it around and continue to bind it until you get all those loose ends down, and you get that shirt steady and tight like a frisbee, like a puck. As you can see here, it's beginning to get its shape. It's almost ready for the dye application, and just continue to go in a roundabout. But I also wanted to mention that there's no right or wrong way to do these things, to where it can often seem like if you don't do it play for play and pound for pound exactly how you see it being done, that you might think that it's being done wrong. But that's not the case, especially with this art form. That's the beauty of this art form, that the little mistakes and the little things, the inconsistencies and the little things that you didn't plan for, I've found are often the most beautiful things, and the things that end up being your favorite part of your art creation when you're done with it. And that's also what I wanted to mention, that we also like to refer to it as an art form. We do believe that it is an art form here. We think that it definitely meets all the criteria for becoming an art form. And so just know that when you're participating in these tie-dye shirt designs, and when you're participating in the tie-dye nation, that you are an artist officially, and you are creating art. And so don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Just know it here, and that's the beauty of this. And that's also one of the main points of the ties versus dyes, is that we really try to implement the different aspects of this art form that is the tie-dye process. And so keep that in mind, and also know that it's also good for you to just kind of take note and kind of try to always be learning something new. And as long as you're learning something new, and as long as you are always constantly moving forward, then nothing you ever do is wrong, and nothing you ever do would be considered a waste, as long as you learn something from it, and as long as you are able to implement that on your next tie-dye design, then it was worth it. And that's the thing, it's a learning process, it's a slow learning curve, and it's all just about trial and error. And so, but also keep in mind that you don't need to do it exactly as you see me doing here. So if you're not going to get it exactly right, just don't let that be a deterrent. Don't let that be the reason why you stop, because there is no right or wrong way to do it. It's all just about what you think is working for you and what works best for you, what works easiest for you. I know a lot of people are selling these tie-dye designs, and so sometimes that is cause for wanting that perfection. But for those who are just doing it at home for their own wardrobe and their own personal reasons, whether it be meditative or whether it be just trying to upgrade or up style your wardrobe, or just trying to do something fun with your kids or with your family, just know that yes, there is no right or wrong way to do it, and just try your best. And as long as you're trying your best, then you're right where you're supposed to be. And so that is a key thing. That's something that I oftentimes forget, and sometimes that I often am trying so hard to strive for perfection that I often get blindsided by that. And so try to just keep that in mind and try to just be aware of that. But okay, as you see me doing here, I am actually starting to map out that shirt, and what I'm doing is I'm just sectioning off the shirt into each different color segment that it will be. And notice how I am not starting in the center of the shirt, I'm starting at the center of the spiral, and that's what you want to do. You want to divide up that shirt from the center of the spiral. So even though the dividends are not going to be equally spaced, they will be equal bands when you unfold the shirt. And so that's how you do that, by dividing the shirt from the center. I recommend that you map it out. It makes it a lot easier to visually see where you're going to be putting different colors. That way when you do start the dye application process, it doesn't get overwhelming and it doesn't get hectic and you don't forget where you're at. And so I recommend that with the magic markers, of course. Always use those, always have those on hand. They're definitely invaluable. And so just notice how I divided the shirt up into 5 equal segments on this side, and then we're going to flip it on over and we're going to divide it into the same segments. And the best way I found to line those lines up correctly is to follow through all the way when you go towards out of the shirt. So when you go down the side, try to go down the side and up under to the other side. That way you'll have a clear stopping point for when you flip the shirt over. That way you'll know, okay, this line starts here and ends here, starts here and ends here. And so that's the best method I found to just make sure that the curve over, you want to just go heavy with the magic marker and make it a really prominent spot. That way you can see it, and that way there will be no confusion, and that way when we do apply the dye, it'll be something that is symmetrical to both sides of the shirt, and be something that it'll just make the finished art form come out looking as best as possible. So that's my recommendation for that. If you have a different way of doing it, drop it in the comments. We'll have a discussion about it. Let me know. And on that note, I wanted to kind of give a shout out to some of our subs, to Kathy Suter 6956, to Daniel 679, to Tim Davis 3249, to Roslyn Roncor 7611, and also Sis's Quilt and Batik, as well as Becky Reed, Goyo's Garden and Tie-Dyes, and Bella Lou 26. I just wanted to say thank you for your time and for your comments and your suggestions. I definitely hope that I've been able to implement them, and I definitely appreciate your support, and I definitely appreciate you being part of the Die Hard family. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And so yes, we're getting into the dye application here. So notice that we're doing multiple colors of each color. And so what that means is we're going to go with 2 different yellows, 2 different purples, multiple blues, multiple pinks, and that is going to give us some depth. And so you want to go with the lighter of the colors first, of course, but just keep in mind that it's always a layering process. So these things are tie-dyeing, it's like ogres or onions. It's all layers. It's all about layers. And so keep that in mind. When you put down one color and you let it sit, it'll sink into the shirt, it'll sink into the folds of the shirt, and then you could add color on top of it, and those underneath tones and colors will still show up when you finish your shirt and when you open up that shirt. And again, for these spiral shirt designs, I would really stress the fact, and I would really go heavy and go hard on that dye application. You're gonna feel like you're wasting dye, but just know that it really takes that little bit extra dye to get deep into those folds. And so notice here how I'm also adding each of the corresponding colors into the different segments, like how I'm putting some blue into the pink and purple, and how I'm putting some purple into the blue. That is so that way when we open up the shirt, it'll give it a more blended and more appealing finished outcome. So let's check out that reveal. Here we go. And so notice those very distinct binds. Notice those different colors, those different color segments, those purples. And notice the multiple colors of the purple, multiple colors of the blues, and then the multiple greens and yellows. And that is how we achieved this shirt. And so I hope that you enjoyed the show. I hope that you found something interesting, and I hope that you learned something new. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining the Tie-Dye Nation and being part of the Tie-Dye Ties vs. Dyes Die Hard family. And thank you for everything. Well, that's going to be it for today, and so we will be seeing you soon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Get out there, tie-dye the world, and we'll see you next time. All right, love you. Bye.